Hello and welcome to another For Chits and Giggles How to and Shall I Play video. My name is Russell and today we will be looking at the game Oh My Goods, designed by Alexander Pfister and published by Mayfair and Lookout Spiel. Now, Oh My Goods is a compact yet thorough engine building game, and your goal is to produce as many victory points as possible through the production of goods. Now, you will take on the role of a worker and you will produce goods. You will use production chains, you will collect resources and you'll hire assistants in order to gain the most victory points, because at the end the player with the most victory points will be the winner. So, how this game works is it takes place over several rounds, and in each round there are 4 phases. There's the deal new cards phase, there is the sunrise phase in which resources will be revealed and then you'll have to choose to build a building, which you'll build in the 4th phase. The 3rd phase is the sunset phase, which more resources are revealed, and then the final phase is the production and building phase, in which case all of your production efforts should come to fruition and you'll get to build buildings or hire assistants. And at the end of the game, the final round occurs after the round in which a player builds their 8th building, and so after that is the final round, and after then you tot up all of your goods, all of your victory points, and then you'll work out who the winner is. So, before I get stuck into the game, first I'm going to show you how to set it up. So, first of all, each player will be dealt a random char burner card, these light blue cards, which they'll place as their first basic building. Then they'll place 7 of these cards, random from the deck, and they'll place them on the top half of the card to represent 7 of that card's goods. Now, as you can see on the card, the symbol in the gear icon in the center on the bottom is the actual good that this card produces, and underneath is how valuable each unit of that good is. But don't worry, I'm going to explain everything else about the card a bit later on. After you've done that, give each player one of these worker cards. These worker cards represent your ability to produce goods in the game, but I'll explain a bit more about those later. The next thing you'll do is then you will give each player 5 cards from the deck, randomly chosen, and these form the player's hand. Then you will deal out a number of workers equal to the number of players times 2. So, for a 3-player game, which I have set up for, you will deal out 6 of these assistant cards. They are double-sided as well, so randomly choose which side up to place them, and then you're ready. The final thing you'll do then is choose the starting player either by your own method or using the method in the rule book, which says the player who last worked the hardest. Once you've got that, you're actually ready to begin. So, before I get into the nitty-gritty about the game, first of all I want to show you a bit more about the cards. So you'll see that actually most of these cards are actually quite similar, so I'll use these as an example. You'll notice there are actually 4 components on each of these cards. The first component is in the top left. That's the number of coins you'd need to spend in order to build that building. The value in the top right is the number of victory points that building will give you if you build it by the end of the game. There's a little box there in the middle on the left-hand side, and that is actually the resource that you may use this card as if you discard it from your hand, but it also represents the resources that everybody will access during the 2nd and 3rd phases of the game, but don't worry, I'll explain all about that. And finally, on the bottom of the card, probably the most crucial bit, is what the actual building does if you were to build it. So in the center there you have a gear icon, but also you have a numeric value underneath, which is how valuable each unit of that good is. On the left-hand side of that, then you'll see the resources required to build to produce that good in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, we'll show you any production chains that this building has. And again, all will be revealed about that later on. There are also other kinds of buildings as well. Here we have grey background cards, and these ones are a little bit different. They don't provide you with any goods except this one, the market offices. They're all market offices, but some of these cards will actually produce another good for you, which you are able to use in the production of actual goods in buildings. So you would now permanently have one of these cloth-like resources for the remainder of the game. However, there is another card and this one is allows you to gain an extra card at the beginning of each round, as long as you have 3 or less cards in your hand at the beginning of the round. Alright, so those are all the different kinds of cards you'll come up with. So now that you know a bit about these cards, it's actually time to show you how to play the game. Okay, so how this game is played over many rounds, like I said, and each round consists of 4 phases. The first phase is the draw new cards phase, and before any player draws new cards, they have the option to mulligan their entire hand. So this means getting rid of every single card in your hand, no matter how many they are, and then discarding them, and then drawing an equal number from the deck. So you might not like the hand you've got, in which case you have a chance to dismiss all of them. Then, after every player has chosen whether to mulligan, then they will all draw 2 more cards to add to their hand. And that is the end of that phase, very simple. The second phase is the sunrise phase. Now in this phase, what you will do is you will draw cards from this deck until you have revealed 2 cards with the sun icon. So in this instance, you can see, I'll show you the little sun icon there. The second one of those that you draw, you will still reveal that card and place it in the center, but then you will stop. After you have revealed these resources, by the way, these resources are available for everybody to use in the game. And once you use these for the production of goods in the last phase of the game, you do not consume them. They are simply always available for all players for all buildings. So the more of them, generally the better. After you have revealed the resources, now you must choose where to place your worker and in which way up you'd like to place this worker. So there are 2 ways you can place this worker. You can place the worker so that they produce efficiently, in which case they will produce 2 goods as represented by the 2 good icons on the top of that card. But you may also produce them, set this worker to produce sloppily, which only produces 1 good but actually requires 1 less resource. So after each player will then choose which building of theirs, you can use any building, to place their worker, and then you must choose also whether to produce it sloppily or efficiently. So after you've chosen that, you may also now choose one of the cards in your hand to try and build in the last phase of each round. You'll choose a building from your hand, and obviously the value on the top left is how much money in goods you'll need to build that. Now you may place a building down which you do not wish to build, or you may not be able to build because you do not have enough money, in which case you do not have to build it, but we'll get to that later. But this is the only time that you can actually choose a building to build later. So it's use it or lose it, as they say. After you've done that, then everybody has done that, then you move on to the third phase. This is another round of drawing cards with resources on. So you, again, much like the second round, you will keep drawing cards until you reveal 2 sun icons. And that second card you will place and then stop. That is the end of the third phase. It's actually very simple. The fourth and final phase in each round is the production and building phase. And in this place, each player, in turn order, will do all of the following. So the first thing you'll do is you will look at the building where you placed your worker. You will see now if that building produces any goods. If you placed your worker efficiently, then you must have all of the resources required to produce that good. You can first check the center area, and any of these resources may be used for this purpose of producing this good. Now, unfortunately, my worker does not have any stone in here. However, now I may discard cards, make up any missing resources from the cards in my hand. And as you can see, I do have plenty of stone in my hand. So if I wished, right now, I could use the 1 wood and the 2 stone from my hand and discard those cards in order to now produce efficiently. If I had produced sloppily, I would only need to discard 1 of these cards because I only require 1 less overall resource to produce now. And in this case, I can use the 1 wood from here and the 1 stone from the card in my hand. An important note about using cards for missing resources, you can only assign them to a single building for a single use. So once I've used this for that purpose, that card is immediately discarded and I don't get to use it again. You'll notice that this card remain on the table. That is because the next player also may use all of the resources in the centre for producing goods. You may also wish to keep an eye on any buildings you have that produce goods, such as this one here, for this purpose, but you will not be allowed to use those for production chains, which we'll get to in a minute. So after you've checked your worker, then you want to check any buildings that have an assistant. So if you look at this one here, this building has an assistant attached to it. Same rules apply. If you have all the resources, you may produce, but the assistants will only ever produce a single good on that building. Anytime you do produce goods, by the way, you take those cards from the draw pile and you'll place them on the top half of the building. If you have produced any goods on any buildings, now you get to choose whether you would like to use the production chains on those buildings. Production chains allow you to turn cards from your hand, as well as goods from other buildings that you have, into more valuable goods. And the way it works is, if the card, and all the char burners will have this, if a card has a production chain that requires a resource in a square box, which is similar to the ones you have in your hand, you may now discard those cards from your hand and immediately convert them into goods. And you can do this as many times as you like. So if I had 5 cards in my hand with the wood symbol on it, I can immediately turn those into 5 goods. If a card requires a resource in a symbol, for example, I'll show you, this card has a production chain of another type of good, which in this case is cattle. Now, one of this player's other buildings actually has cattle as the good it produces. And even though this building did not get produced, this building did, and so I can use the production chain and I can take those goods from my other buildings and immediately convert them into the more valuable resource, which in this case is meat. You can do this as many times as you like. Also, some buildings require 2 different items. Sometimes they are 2 goods, sometimes they are 2 resources, and sometimes they are 1 of each. If this should be the case, you can only convert goods if you have 1 of each of those items, in which case you will then turn those 2 items into 2 goods. An easy way to remember to do this properly is that during this production chain you will never discard cards. You will simply turn them immediately into goods. So you should never have to discard cards. After you have used the production chains, then you may also now choose to build the building that you chose to place in phase 2. In this case, this building requires 7 money, and I could use those, I have to use that money from goods that I own. Luckily, I have quite a lot of goods of these, which are worth 1 each, so I would discard 7 of these cards, discard them, and now I can build my window manufacturer. However, if you have cards or goods that are worth more than 1, you may use those as you wish. However, if you overspend in goods, you will not get to use that extra money, you will not receive it back. So you can overspend, fine, but you will not get that money back. So that's a strategic decision for you. So, after you have chosen to build, you may also, by the way, choose not to build, even if you have the correct money, in which case, if you do not wish to build, you take that card back into your hand, if you've placed one. Then, you may, if you have not built a building in this round, you may choose to build hire an assistant as long as you meet the requirements. So, the requirements are listed on the assistants, and they are having built buildings of a certain colour and number. So in this instance, to hire this assistant, I would require 2 grey buildings, 1 green, and 1 red building built in my little town area. And if I do not, then I cannot build that. If I have met the requirements, I will pay the money in the top left of that corner, and then I would have to immediately place my assistant underneath a building that I own. Now, if I place an assistant somewhere, I could also choose right now the building where my worker just was, because the worker has done his job, he's produced the goods, and so it opens that slot up. Once you've placed an assistant, it actually remains there for the rest of the game, unless you wish to spend 2 money during the second phase, the sunrise phase, to move it to a different building. If you should get into the situation where you have 2 players wanting to hire the same assistant, priority will go to the player who is currently the active player, and then in clockwise order from there. So after you have finished, and then all the players in turn order have done all of that, then you'll begin a new round by discarding all of the cards from the centre, and then beginning a new round. Now, earlier on I did mention that in the final round, there is a final round that occurs after a player has built their 8th building. This final round, which takes place after the round in which a player builds their 8th building, something unique occurs. In the final round, you play it as normal until you get to the final phase, the production and building phase, and at this point, all players are allowed to use all production chains on all of their buildings, even those that do not have workers or assistants placed on them, and those buildings that did not produce goods. This is a final opportunity for you to turn those less valuable goods into more valuable goods, using cards from your hand and other goods on other buildings in order to score the most coins worth of value of goods. And the reason for this is because at the end of the game you can convert 5 coins worth of goods into 1 victory point. After you have converted all of your goods into points and you have added up all points on cards on buildings you have built, as well as assistants you have hired, then you will work out who is the winner, which is obviously the player with the highest number of points. If a tie occurs, you break that tie based on the number of coins left over after you've converted all the goods you can, and then you'll work out the winner. So that is actually the entire game, and I hope I've explained it to you well, but that is how to play. But the question now is, should you play it? Well, if you've been liking what you've seen so far, you've probably already made a decision. But for those who aren't sure, this game does involve push your luck, because during the game you can choose to risk producing efficiently, hoping that the goods, the resources that you need will come out in the 3rd phase, the sunset phase. And obviously there's a bit of push your luck there, because if you do not get what you need and you don't have the cards to pay for it, then you go bust and you don't get to do anything that turn. So it's kind of a bit risky. There's obviously a lot of luck because there's a lot of card draw in this game. There's a lot of little bits of like hand management, there's resources. So if any of those mechanics sound like some things that you like enjoying other games, then this is probably a solid bet for you. Also, as it's designed by Alexander Pfister, it very much ticks all of the boxes that he has in his other games. So if you like Alexander Pfister's other games, such as Port Royal or Great Western Trail, then you're probably in good shape to try this one, and it is good. It's a very quick game normally, usually takes sort of like half an hour or less, depending on obviously who you're playing with. So it's a very good filler game, like a game that fits in between other games. It's such a game that comes with this much gameplay, because there's a lot of replayability to this game, not only with the assistants, but obviously with the cards that you're dealt, and you very much have to develop your strategy on the fly in those instances. Then this is also a very good value game for what it costs and what you get. So to summarise, if you like any of Alexander Pfister's other games, then you will probably enjoy this. It's got a bit of push your luck, it's got a bit of hand resource management, it's got a bit of engine building. It's a very neat little game in a very compact box, very good value for money. The iconography is very easy to understand, so it's language independent. And yeah, it's just a very neat little game in a very small box, which is very highly recommended. So yes, I would officially say you should play this game. So if you've liked this video and you found it helpful, we've got lots of other videos and articles on our website. It's forchitsandgiggles.com. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, you can like us on Facebook, and we would very much value any comments or things you have to say about this video. So that's it from me today. We hope to see you in another video soon. Until then, take care.